What's going on, everybody? Wednesday, which means it's Q&A day, and you know just how much I love Q&A day. Now, as always, you all brought me some great questions, but I just want to take a step back, and I just want to remind you all, and thank you all, the only reason that the Q&A day is even possible is because you all keep sending in such great questions. If you weren't sending in questions, if you weren't sending in great questions, what we would be left with is something that's not really that interesting. But the reason it's fun is because you all challenge me with really difficult questions where I give my opinion. You know, a lot of the stuff that I do on my channel, a lot of the videos, a lot of the opinions, a lot of the comments that I make are not necessarily for everyone. That, you know, everybody has their own opinion, and I'm just simply sharing mine. More than anything, I just really like the hobby. I like the strategy of it. I like the beauty of it. I like the hunt of it. I love the financial pieces of it. I love so much about it. So even though there are going to be times that you all may not agree with me, or you may not like what I have to say, or you may not be that interested in what I'm talking about, just know that I'm just here sharing my love of collecting cards with you and trying to make this a fun journey together. If you have a question for an upcoming episode, down below in the comments, please simply type your question and I'd be happy to feature it on an upcoming episode. With that, let's take a look at a really good first question right here. How do you balance jumping on a deal at a show and taking your time and looking around? When I'm on a budget, but if I find a great deal, I worry that if I think on the card, it will be gone. All right. That is a terrific question. You know, you get to the first table at the show, and they've got a card you're really interested in, and it's a good price, and you say, do I buy it? Because if you buy it, you might use your entire budget for the show at the very first table. And then you're just basically at a museum for the rest of the day because you can't buy anything because you've spent all of your money. It's a really good question, and it's a really difficult question. All I can do is share with you my opinion and my strategy whenever I go to a show. So first off, it depends on what the card is. If it's a super rare card, if it's a card you're not likely to see anywhere else in the show, if it's a card that you've been hunting for, if it's a card that has a really low pop report, then you might have to just bite the bullet and buy that card right there, because there's a chance that if you leave the table, the next person who walks up is going to buy it. And it's also important because if you walk away and it does get purchased before you come back, you may not see it again for a long time. So part of the answer is it depends on the card. It depends on how rare the card is. It also depends on how good of a deal it is. Let's say you walk up and it's a $500 card, and you know it's a $500 card, and you're interested in it, and they're asking $350. And your budget for the show is $350 or $400. I think you have to buy it. I think you have to buy it because in a worst case scenario, you could probably sell that card for more than you bought it for. If you end up going, maybe I shouldn't have bought it, you could probably flip it. You could probably even flip it at the show. So it kind of depends on the liquidity of the card. How in demand is that particular card? If that card is a very high demand, very low supply card, and it's way under comps, I think you got to go for it. If it's a super rare card that you're likely not going to see at any other table, or you've been hunting for a very long time, I think you got to buy it. But if it's a card that there's probably several of at the show, then I think that is when it becomes tough. You go, do I want to buy something right away? Now, my philosophy has always been, I don't usually buy something right away. I usually make a loop where I look. And then on my second loop, I buy. Now, if it's a cheap card, if it's a $10 card, a $20 card, I might buy it on the first loop. Rarely, though, do I buy an expensive card. And what do I consider expensive? Anything over $80 to $100. Anything over $80 to $100, I'm usually not buying on the first loop. Unless it's ultra rare, unless it's way below comps, and it's something that I've been looking for a while. Because, again, if there are going to be other dealers that might have that same card, you say, hey, I know you're asking $200. There's a guy over there I just saw, was asking $160 for it. Would you take $160? And that might provide you some leverage. But a cheap card that's not going to blow your entire budget, and you feel like it's a good deal and it's a card that you've been wanting, yeah, I'd probably just buy that as well. So super complicated question, super complicated topic. There's not a straight do this in this situation, do this in that situation. But that's always been my philosophy. I always take my first loop. I see what's in the room. I get an idea for the inventory. Then on my second loop, I usually start buying then. My third loop, depending on the size of the show, that's when I start really digging through some boxes. That's when I start hunting for some, buried treasure in a value box or something. And if there's a card that I think, hey, I'm definitely interested in that card on my second loop, and it's not there, that's okay. It just means it wasn't meant to be. And if it's not an ultra rare card, I'll see that card again soon. But if it's an ultra rare card, I think I got to get it. Who would you have in your all-time starting lineup? Include a catcher, first base, second base, shortstop, third base, left field, center field, right field, DH, and starting pitcher. All right. A list. You know how I feel about lists. Whenever you guys ask me for my opinion with a list, I know I'm setting myself up. But that's part of the fun. Part of the fun is giving your input on why I made a good choice or a bad choice in my lists. Now, when we answer this question, there's a couple of ways it could be answered. It could be answered on if you're making your best all-time starting lineup, and then there's what's the best player at each position? So it's definitely different. For example, if I'm doing my best all-time starting lineup, for left field, I might consider Rickey Henderson, because Rickey Henderson is, the best leadoff hitter of all time. And by being the best leadoff hitter of all time, he adds a dimension to my lineup. But I don't think Rickey Henderson is the best left fielder of all time. So if we're going position by position and picking the best player versus we're going position by position and trying to create the best lineup, another example would be right field. In right field, if I'm looking for the best starting lineup, I might get Ichiro because he can steal bases. He's great defensively. He's a great contact hitter, hits for a high average, scores lots of runs. But if I say who's the best right fielder of all time, I think most people would say Babe Ruth. So I'm going to go with position by position. Who do I kind of consider the best player at each position? My DH is going to be one of the best hitters that I didn't include at their particular position. To make things more card interesting, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick my favorite card to represent that player for each player that I pick. For example, when I pick my catcher, I won't just pick my catcher. I'll pick my catcher and pick my favorite card of that player. All right? So let's take a look. Okay, my all-time top players by position. And each player will be represented by my favorite card of that player, just to make things a little bit more, sports card interesting. So when we look at the diamond, my catcher, it's got to be Johnny Bench, right? Awesome defensively, awesome offensively. And my favorite Johnny Bench card is his second-year card, the 1969 Topps rookie trophy card. Such a great-looking card. And obviously he shares the card with another player for his rookie card. Over at first base, I'm going with Lou Gehrig. There's a couple tough other choices to decide for at first base, but I went Lou Gehrig, and my favorite Lou Gehrig card is the 34 Gaudy with the yellow background. Such a beautiful card. My second baseman is going to be Rogers Hornsby, and a card I'd really like to pick up in the next 12 months is the 1933 Rogers Hornsby card. Now, there are two cards of Rogers Hornsby in that set. This is my favorite, the one where he's actually in action on the field. Now, you knew my shortstop was going to be Ernie Banks with the 54 Topps Ernie Banks card. Now, I know there are some other really good second basemen and shortstops, but Ernie Banks is my guy for short, and the 54 Topps is obviously my favorite Ernie Banks card. When we look over at third base, I'm going Mike Schmidt. Now, Mike Schmidt's rookie card is a two-player card, so I can't pick that. And then his second-year card, I don't really like all that much, to be honest with you. So I think my favorite Schmidt card is the 75 Topps Schmidt. It's a little bit of a tighter shot. Cool picture of him. Out in left field, I got to go with Ted Williams for my left fielder. Now, I know there's some people that are going to throw some other names at me and tell me why I'm wrong there. But I'm a huge Ted Williams guy. My favorite Ted Williams is the 56 Topps. I totally understand why someone would think it was the 49 Leaf. And I respect that, but for me, it's the 56 Topps. My center fielder's got to be Willie Mays. Willie Mays is interesting because he has some cards that I'm not a huge fan of the look of the card, but I love the 58 Topps. So the 58 Topps to represent Willie Mays out in center field. And then at right field, I don't think you can go wrong picking Babe Ruth. Now, Babe Ruth has quite a few cool cards. He's got 4 Gaudis from the 33 Gaudy set. My favorite is this one. The one where you can actually see his full body, you can see his full swing. That is my card for Babe Ruth. Now, my pitcher, I'm going Walter Johnson. And my favorite Walter Johnson card is the T206 portrait with the yellow background. I love that card. And I do get a DH still. So my DH is a tough one. I almost went Barry Bonds, but I'm going Ty Cobb. Ty Cobb, and of all the Ty Cobb cards, there are some great ones. I love the Cracker Jack Ty Cobb. He's got some good portrait cards. But my favorite Ty Cobb card is the T206 bat on shoulder card. This is one baseball card that might be toward or at the very highest point on the list of cards I'd love to add to my collection. So what do you think of my starting lineup? Again, if I was doing it for a lineup, I probably would have switched a couple of things around so I have a leadoff hitter and stuff. But I don't know. I really like this team. I really like these spots. I am particularly attracted to PSA half grades for vintage cards. PSA doesn't seem to give out too many, as population reports for half grades are dramatically lower than full grades. My question is, what is your take on how half grades work? Do you think PSA half grades will have a more prominent place in the hobby moving forward? And do you think 9.5 and 0.5 grades should exist in the PSA grading rubric? I completely agree about half grades. Why does PSA not have more half grades? That's a great question. In fact, I did a video a few months back, and I think I called it Half Grades Matter. Because PSA doesn't really give a lot of half grades, and it seems like half grades don't sell for kind of the price between two full grades, right? A 6.5 doesn't seem to sell for a price between a 6 and a 7. Now, again, we always have to keep in mind, it does always depend on the card. Again, it is about the card, not the grade. But grades are a guide. So, generally speaking, in theory, a 6.5 is a little bit better than a 6, but not quite a 7. So let's start with, why doesn't PSA give a lot of half grades? Frankly, I kind of think it's laziness. I kind of think it makes the rubric and grading more difficult if you start getting into half grades. I think they have a process where they say, top right corner, what's its score? Here's what each, score would represent. Top left corner, what's its score? Centering here, what's the score? Surface, and they have like a whole rubric. And I think that the rubric kind of translates into a full grade. Now, half grades, where do half grades come from? There are some things that can't exist on certain grades. So if you look in the PSA guidelines, it's very, very specific of a card that is a 10 can be between, like 60-40 centering or, 45-55 or whatever it is. It'll say a touch on each corner. It'll say, a card that is a 4, for example, might have a light surface wrinkle. But a card that is a 5 does not have any wrinkles. So I think that's kind of where they use their half grades. For example, if it says that a card that's a 4 might have a light surface wrinkle, but a card that is a 5 does not have any sort of surface imperfections, then I think they go, that's a really nice card that has a light surface wrinkle. But a 5 can't have a surface wrinkle according to their guidelines, so they give it a 4.5. So generally speaking, for me, when I see a half grade, it means it's an exceptional card that has something about it that makes it not able to go higher than the grade that it gets. So if it gets a 3.5, that means there's something listed in the description for a 4 that it has. So they can't give it a 4. Like it might say, a 5 has at least 75-25 centering. I'm just making this up. So a 5 has 75-25 centering, and this card is gorgeous, but it's 80-20 centering. So it can't get that 5, so it gets a 4.5. I think they use it as a way to kind of bump a card just below a grade when there's something that violates what has to be, on the card or not on the card for it to get that specific grade. That's kind of been my interpretation. As far as 9.5s go, I don't understand why they don't have 9.5s. Again, seems kind of lazy to me. Why not have 9.5s? Why not have half grades? I don't know. That's a good question too. Why don't they have half grades? The problem is now if you change it, it changes a lot of stuff because there are a lot of 9s that didn't get 10s, and now you're opening up half 9.5s. Well, a lot of those 9s probably would have gotten 9.5s, but because there wasn't a 9.5 available, it got a 9. So now it gets a 9, and it would have gotten a 9.5. So it kind of, once you kind of have your guidelines, it's really hard at any point to then change your guidelines, because the ramifications of all the cards that didn't get to participate in these new guidelines. There are a lot of cards that are 1s that if they had a 0.5 grade wouldn't have gotten 1s, they would have gotten 0.5s. But now they have 1s. So if you start introducing 0.5s, then all those 1s technically have a better grade than all of those 0.5s. So I think it just complicates things. One of the most important things that grading companies do, ideally, is stay consistent. So as soon as you change the grading scale, it throws everything out of whack. I personally do genuinely look at the card more than the grade. I have some really nice cards that I think are severely undergraded. And so when we talk about half grades, the reason I think that they're important is because I think that they do tend to be nicer cards than their grade. They just can't be higher because they don't meet one of the standards on the grading guideline. So generally, I think half grades are actually kind of nicer eye appeal type cards. Now, what do I think is going to happen moving forward with half grades? I don't know, but one of the reasons I think that they don't sell for a lot, and this is just a guess, is I think when people go into searching filters like on eBay, they don't go in there and click on, or they don't type in, 1986 Topps Jerry Rice PSA 8 and then 8.5. They just put 8. They don't put in 8.5 and 9, they just put in 9. They don't put in 7 and 7.5, they just put in 7. So I think that the searches for half grades, people don't tend to search for a half grade. They search for a 7, or they search for an 8, or they search for a 9, but they don't search for an 8.5. So I think a lot of those don't get seen. Now, when you then take that in an auction, and less eyes are on those half grades, I think they fall between the cracks. And I think that they go for less than maybe they should. So what's the takeaway? I think the takeaway is, if you're looking for a card, like a 1959 Bob Gibson in a 5, I think what maybe you do is you go into the eBay filter and you click on 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 6. Because number one, that's going to give you all of the cards in this range. And ultimately, we should be looking at the cards, not the grade of the card. The grade of the card is just a recommendation. It's not the law. That's my take. That's what I do. That's what I recommend. Reminding and offering a Q&A question that I initially asked days ago. Your one favorite card for each vintage year of Topps baseball from 1951 to 1973. Okay, I like this question, but the thing I want to point out first is I appreciate your patience on this one with me. When you talk about pick a card from like over 20 years worth of sets, like that is not an easy process. Like, it's really difficult to think of every single year and what's your favorite card. So some questions are a lot easier than others. I appreciate you resubmitting the question because it is a good question. It's an interesting question. It's an opinion question. Again, it's one that's not right or wrong, even though I know some people are going to tell me how some of my choices were bad ones, and that's okay. So here's my thought. I'm not going to go through every set and look at every card and then pick my favorite card. What I did is I went through each set and I thought to myself, okay, 1951 Topps redback, blueback. What's the card that I think of as a cool looking card? And that's the card I picked. The 1952 Topps set. When I think of that set, what card pops out as particularly an attractive card? A good looking card. My favorite card. So this is sort of stream of consciousness picks as I go through all of these years. And some of them are iconic cards a lot of people will agree with, and some people will go, really, that card? And I could easily be convinced of changing my opinion on some of these. Somebody might go, oh, you picked that for the 68 Topps? This card is a beautiful card. And I go, I am. They were right. Yeah, I missed that one. So this is my pick for each year Stream of consciousness, when I think of the set, what card do I think of as being my favorite? Right off the bat, here's the list with a picture of the card. Let's take a look. All right, so right off the bat, got the 1951 Topps Redback Warren Spahn. I love the Warren Spahn because of how youthful he looks. There's a cool Duke Snider. There's a cool Yogi Berra. There are several cool cards in this set, but I think I got to go Warren Spahn. 52, man, there's so many good ones, 52 Topps. You know, the easy pick would be to go Mantle, but I really like the Jackie Robinson. So for the 52 Topps set, I'm going to say my favorite card is the Jackie Robinson. Now, again, my mind could be changed on any of these because I kind of did them stream of consciousness. When I think of the 53 Topps set, I think of this awesome Monty Irvin card. He has so many great-looking cards, and the 53 Topps is one of them. I just absolutely love that card, and it's the one I most think of when I think of the 53 Topps set. The 54 Topps set, that was the easiest choice. My all-time favorite card is the 54 Topps Ernie Banks. So, of course, I'm going to pick the Ernie Banks for my card for the 54 set. Such a great card that I will own soon. I predict in the next 12 months I'm going to own that card. That's my prediction. I hope I'm right. 55, another one of my all-time favorite cards, is the 55 Sandy Koufax. I think it is just a beautiful card. The color, the pop of the portrait, the B for the Brooklyn on the hat. So many things I love about that card. So that was an easy choice for the 55 set, going with Sandy Koufax. Another one of my all-time favorite cards is the 56 Topps Mickey Mantle. So when I got to the 56 set, it was a pretty easy decision. Now, sure, I love the Ted Williams as well, and I love the Jackie Robinson as well, but the 56 Mantle was an easy pick for me. Now, the 57 set, I think there's so many great photos. I love the Warren Spahn in that set. I love the Frank Robinson where he's choking up on the bat. But the 57 Don Drysdale with a youthful Don Drysdale as it is his rookie card and the big B on his cap for Brooklyn is getting the nod from me. 58, another tough one. There's some really good cards. I love the Whitey Ford in the 58 set, but Willie Mays for the 58 Topps, the blue background in contrast with his picture is such a cool look. So that was a harder decision, but I love that card. For 59, you know, Roberto Clemente has a ton of great cards, and you're going to see more Roberto Clemente picks. For 1960, sort of the classic card when I think of the 1960 set is the Mickey Mantle. My dad once owned that card in a 9. In the 1961 set, I love the Carl Yastrzemski. There are some other great cards in the set, but the 61 Yastrzemski is my favorite. I own this one. I only own a handful of these cards, but I do own the 61 Yastrzemski, and I think you understand why. The 62 Roger Maris. Such an important card. It's the one that has his home run total on the back. There's a few cards in this set I like. I like the Lou Brock card. I like the Gaylord Perry card, but the 62 Roger Maris with the importance of that card. 63 was a tough one. There wasn't really a card that stood out to me. So I thought on this one for a while, kind of went back and forth for a while. But I went with the 63 Topps Hank Aaron. Most of his cards, he's not looking at the camera, but he is in this one. Really like that card. I could have gone with the 58 Aaron for the 58 set as well. The 64 set was an easy one. I love the Pete Rose. Second year Pete Rose, rookie trophy card. Beautiful card. Absolutely love this card, especially coming off his 63 rookie card, which is not the best looking card in the world. So that was an easy one. And believe it or not, I went back to back with Pete Rose. I love his 65 card. I don't know. He looks so young. I like his batting stance. He's got, you know, his Cincinnati uniform and cap showing. I love this card as well. So back to back with Pete Rose. I love the 64 and 65. The 66, I'm back to Willie Mays. I like that he's actually smiling in this set. There aren't a ton of cards in the 66 set that jump out at me. So when I think of it, I think of the Willie Mays for sure, as I think it's a great picture of him. He's got Giants across his chest, and he's got his San Francisco hat on. 67, I'm going Ernie Banks. One of the better Ernie Banks cards, other than his 54 tops, obviously, is the 67. He's got a big old smile. He's such a photogenic guy. He just looks in this picture like such a nice person. So that card is one that I always think of with that set. Now, the 68 set, I love the Tom Seaver. I also love the Rod Carew, but I like the Tom Seaver more. I am a fan of the rookie trophy cards. That adds to it, but it's a great picture of a young Tom Seaver. Love this card. Pretty easy choice. 69 is another easy choice. The iconic Johnny Bench. The 69 Johnny Bench rookie trophy. Again, he comes off of a rookie card the year before where he shares the card. But then you see, I mean, he looks like he's 20 years old here. He probably is 20 years old there. He just looks so young. Got his catcher's mitt. Love that card. The 1970 set. I like the Reggie Jackson. I like the Clemente as well. But the Reggie Jackson gets the nod for me. A young-looking Reggie Jackson in an A's uniform. You can see the stadium in the background. Very cool card that I think of immediately when I think of the 70 set. And then the 71, you go Roberto Clemente. Love this card. So many people consider this the best Clemente card, and they're probably right. The color match, the black border, it is a beautiful card. So I went with 71 for Roberto Clemente, and you wouldn't even believe it, but I went back-to-back Roberto Clemente. So for whatever reason, this card has always had a special place for me. I love the yellow helmet with the black brim, and, you know, he's like he's playing catch. I love that card. Why are some cards worth more than others, even if it's the same player and the same year? For example, the 1963 Fleer versus the 63 Tops of a player. You know, this is an interesting question, especially for those of us that grew up in the era in collecting in the 80s where there was the Donruss and the Tops and the Fleer and, you know, then other things as well. So it's like, why did the 84 Donruss Don Mattingly become the premium one, and the 84 Tops and the 84 Fleer were also cool, but they're not as valuable, right? That's kind of the question. Now, if we're talking with vintage, there aren't a lot of guys that have two cards in a year, especially rookie cards. Just some off the top of my head would be like Monty Irvin. Monty Irvin has a 51 Bowman, and he has a 51 Topps Redback, right? 1952, there's a 52 Topps Mini Minoso, and there's a 52 Bowman Mini Minoso. Both are rookie cards. One is more valuable than the other. So then the question is, why? Why is one more valuable than the other? Well, with the value of anything, it always goes back to supply and demand, right? So you go, oh, okay, so let's just take another year, vintage that has multiple sets, 63 Tops and 63 Fleer, okay? So like there's a 1963 Fleer Bob Gibson, and there's a 1963 Topps Bob Gibson. And the Topps one, generally speaking, is more valuable. Now, not always. You know, it kind of, you know, it'll fluctuate. But it tends to be a little bit more valuable than the Fleer one. So then you go, why is it more valuable? They're both Bob Gibson. They're both 1963. Well, the first place I would look is, I'd look at the supply. Well, if you pull the pop report, which I did for the 63 Bob Gibson, there are about 1,300 Topps Bob Gibsons that have been graded by PSA. If you look at the 63 Fleer set, there have been about 1,000 Bob Gibsons that have been graded by PSA. So there are more that have been graded by the top set than the Fleer set, okay? So your initial instinct would be, well, if there's fewer of the Fleer, then the Fleer should be worth more. But generally speaking, the tops tends to be worth more. So why does the tops tend to be worth more? Well, if it's not because of supply, it's because of demand, right? It's because more people want the 63 tops Bob Gibson than the 63 Fleer Bob Gibson. Now, why? That is an interesting question. I can't answer everybody else's opinion. The 63 tops Bob Gibson is because it's a brutal set, because of the borders, because of the limited supply. It does seem like it's harder to find a nice one. And personally, I think especially with some of the coloring and color matching in that card, it is a better looking card. It has better eye appeal for me, but it doesn't mean it is for everyone else. I think a lot of people prefer the Topps eye appeal to the Fleer eye appeal. They're both decent looking cards. I'd like to have both of them. I have neither of them. But then the other piece of it is there's a certain amount of brand loyalty. Like, I still don't understand why some of the early Bowman cards are not worth more than they are. Like the 54 Bowman, the 53 Bowman, the 51, 52, 50 Bowmans are some awesome cards. They're awesome cards. But in a lot of cases, the tops are worth a lot more than the Bowman. The Mini Minoso is a perfect example. So the 52 Bowman Mini Minoso versus the 52 Topps Mini Minoso. The 52 Topps is worth a lot more than the 52 Bowman. Personally, my personal opinion is I prefer the 52 Bowman Mini Minoso over the 52 Topps Mini Minoso. But the 52 Topps Mini Minoso is worth a lot more than the 52 Bowman. That must mean more people want the 52 Topps one than the 52 Bowman. And part of that is most people, when they think of collecting cards, they think of Topps. They don't think of Bowman. They don't think of even Fleer, because Fleer wasn't really around for most of the vintage years. So there's certainly brand loyalty. There's certainly brand preference. There's certainly supply issues. There's certainly demand issues. It's an insanely complicated topic that nobody could point to a single thing and give an explanation as to why, other than its supply and its demand. So if the cost of something is more than the other one, and the supply is equal or close, it must be because of a dramatically higher amount of demand. Great question. Brutally difficult question, because it's impossible to know the answer. We just have some guesses as to why it is. With that said, 5 more great questions. I hope that you thought they were good answers. And if you didn't, I'm sure you'll let me know below, which is fine. Go ahead, though, and down below, type your questions for next week's episode. I look forward to seeing what questions you have for me, and I hope that you look forward to the answers or opinions that I share next week.